Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam,
And I'm Marcia.
and we like World War II media, and we want to talk about it.
Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. This week we are talking about the movie Ballad of a Soldier from 1959. It was directed and written by Grigory Chukai, also written by Valentin Yezhov. These are all Russian names. It's a Russian movie, guys. I will butcher these and I will not apologize. So, the director Kai served in World War II, first in the communications battalion and later in the airborne troops. His next film, called Clear Skies, was also a World War II movie. The movie Ballad of a Soldier tells the fictional story of a young Russian soldier whose journey home from the Eastern Front to visit his mother is full of setbacks and delays, but he also meets the girl of his dreams. It received the Lenin Prize in 1961, which is a famous Soviet art prize, and you can watch this movie on YouTube, which was very convenient for us, and it has good subtitles. So, what did you think of this movie?
Oh man, I liked it. And I watched it before you and I sent you a message and I was like, I think you're gonna like it too. There's some artsy components. I think the cinematography is good. Everyone, of course, the two main actors are very good looking, but most of these people are just ordinary looking people with interesting faces, older people. And the camera work just makes them look really beautiful in a way. And they have these big bright eyes. And I found that all of the sort of little supporting characters felt really fleshed out and real to me in a way that I really liked. I haven't seen any Russian movies about World War II before, I believe, so it was really cool to get that perspective. It was super interesting to watch this movie, especially given when it came out in 1959 while the Soviet Union was still in full swing. So, yeah, a good movie, I would say. What about you?
I also, like you predicted, I really liked it. I almost wouldn't say it's much of a war movie, and I don't mean that in a negative way. You basically follow the soldier on furlough, so you don't see, well, it opens with an interesting tank chase, but other than that, you don't really see any fighting. So it's mostly about this young boy's journey home. They do something with the lighting that makes everyone look really pretty. I think that's mostly it. It's got really good lighting. It's in black and white. It also makes me wonder if people just look better in black and white in general. As an amateur photographer, I find that if photos look shitty and you turn them black and white, they look much better. So maybe. And it's funny, it's very sweet, it's a little sad, it's got a little bit of everything. The music is really classic. And obviously, it's in Russian, so I couldn't make any sense of it without subtitles. But like I said, this one has good subtitles, so it's quite easy to follow. The dialogue is interesting. So yeah, I liked it. It's not very long either. It's 90 minutes or something. It's not one of those that'll have you glued to your screen for 3 hours.
The subtitles are really good. I find that sometimes when you get subtitles, you can tell that they're just spit out by a computer, but I felt like these ones, I mean, I don't speak Russian either, but I felt like they gave me a sense of more of the tone of what was being said. I mean, it was very like kind of colloquial and you really got a sense for who the characters were. It wasn't just specifically the direct meaning, you were also getting some of the subtext and stuff too.
Yes. So I would definitely recommend, we'll do a little rating at the end, but I would recommend you watch it, maybe even before you listen to the rest of the episode. Like, go and watch it now and then come back to us.
Definitely. Go watch it now.
Right, let's get into the plot.
We open on an idyllic village scene. There's a woman played by Antonina Maximova who is walking alone. We see her walk past her neighbors, but they don't really speak with her. And she sort of walks to the edge of the village and she's looking down this long road. And this shot kind of gets repeated at the end of the movie. So it's sort of bookended by this. We learn from a voiceover that her son, Alyosha, has died in the war and is buried far away. And we get told that the movie will portray a story about her son that not even she knows. So we know that our main character is deceased before the story even starts, but somehow this movie manages to imbue him with life and make his story so interesting and kinetic in a way where you almost forget that that's the case and you're rooting for him to survive and for him to live happily ever after throughout the movie.
Yeah, I almost feel like he could have survived. Like, we don't see him die. The only reason we know he's dead is because it opens that way. So in my head, he's still alive. He just made it. I don't care. He needs to live.
Well, between 9 and 11 million Russian soldiers died in World War II. And if that sounds like a fuck off huge number, it is. More than 80% of all combat in World War II took place on the Eastern Front. It was definitely a gap in my knowledge, I would say. And I think that perhaps in the West, we're a little less knowledgeable about that side of things. So that was one of the reasons why I was super excited to watch this movie and get the chance to look into it a little bit more.
I also didn't know that 75% of the German army fought on the Eastern Front. That's a lot. It makes you think, like, if there hadn't been two fronts, how would the war have turned out? We're not going to answer that in this podcast. But so many people were fighting on the Eastern Front, and I had no idea of the sheer numbers of that.
Well, it's even crazy when you think of the geography. Like the border of France and Germany is like 300 miles. The border that the Germans and the Russians were fighting on was like 1,800 miles.
I don't know what that is in kilometers.
It's really fucking far. It's like 2,500 kilometers.
That's wild to think that so many of these people were on foot, too. They were just marching for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. It's crazy.
Well, and there were still big chunks of both armies that were on horseback, and they had their big artillery guns that were being pulled by horses. I mean, we think of this being a very technologically advanced war compared to everything else that had happened in history, but the Germans were literally using hundreds of thousands of horses.
Wild. I didn't know anything about the Eastern Front. I'm a bit embarrassed to admit. But I guess that's because the Netherlands is so involved in the other part of the war that that's what you learn about in school. Again, this movie is a very good reason for you to go and check out some more resources, even though the movie itself is fictional and there's some vague references to stuff that actually happened, but you could interpret it in different ways. So you will have to do your own research. The movie is not gonna point you in any sort of direction.
The one thing that I did like was as Alyosha was traveling through Russia to go home from the front to visit his mother, you do see in the background the impacts of the war. He's passing through these places that are bombed out. People are sifting through rubble. They're eating these tins of beef. They don't have enough food. They're having a hard time accessing supplies and this kind of stuff. So you are kind of getting a sense of how everyone's been impacted in the background.
All of it's artsy, like even the backgrounds are artsy. And to me, at the beginning, it kind of feels like and maybe the landscape was like that, like you're just looking at a bunch of fields with people in them. It feels very kind of desolate. And it probably would have been because it's such a long ass strip of land that they've got to cover, so a lot of it would have been farmland. Even that looks pretty. Even the rubble and the destruction looks kind of pretty. So they did a great job at making it look cinematic.
Yeah, for sure.
So after our flash forward where we see Alyosha's mother, we go back to the Eastern Front on July 1942. We meet young signalman Private Alyosha Skvortsov, played by Vladimir Ivashov, and he's trying to warn a superior about oncoming tanks before beating a hasty retreat. We see him run away and the tanks kind of pursue him. Some of it's upside down for some reason, I don't know why, but it's fun. And as he's escaping, he destroys two tanks that are pursuing him, which is a pretty heroic and amazing thing for him to do.
Yeah, and it's interesting because his superiors obviously view it as heroic as well, but I think you can tell from his body language and the look on his face that for him it was a matter of survival. Like he did it because he had to, and he was panicked and scared the whole time, which I enjoyed that sort of little sense that you got from it.
Yeah, at the same time, it felt almost a little bit slapstick to me because he was being chased by this huge tank and there was no one else around. Just him and this tank, like, going across the field and then upside down and then, oh look, there's a bazooka. I don't know, I don't think it's a bazooka, but it looks like a bazooka to me. But at least anti-tank weapons, and he takes them and he just destroys them. I find the destroying itself to be quite underwhelming. but it doesn't have to be big and flashy. It works.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the highest budget part of the movie, so it's not specified necessarily when exactly we are. You kind of get hints because throughout the movie, every now and again, you'll get fragments of radio broadcasts talking about the movement of Russian troops and that sort of thing. So there are hints that this falls during the Battle of the Caucasus, which was a series of German operations to gain control over the Caucasus area and its oil fields beginning in July of 1942. And the Caucasus is an area that straddles Eastern Europe and Western Asia between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And the way this fits into the whole battle on the Eastern Front is that despite the earlier non aggression pact, the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union in June of 1941 in Operation Barbarossa. The German forces were super successful at first, but they ended up being unable to take Moscow for a whole bunch of different reasons. So they changed focus to the Caucasus in the summer of 1942. Stalingrad was a large industrial center and an access point to the oil fields that they wanted to get to, so this became a focal point for a mighty clash between the two armies. The Battle of Stalingrad from July of 1942 to February of 1943 was the bloodiest battle of World War II, and it was also considered a turning point in the war. The German surrender on February 2nd, 1943 was the first surrender by one of Hitler's field armies. And so, right at the beginning of this part of the war is where we are. And the Germans were ultimately repulsed from the whole of the Caucasus area, and fighting ended in that area in September of 1943.
It amazes me how long some of these battles were, too, on the Eastern Front. You talk about some of them being a couple weeks or a couple days, but some of these were. I don't remember which city was besieged by the Germans, but it was besieged for like 980 days or something.
It's Leningrad, yeah, and it was just under 3 years or something, I think.
That's a hella long time. Also, upon doing research about why Hitler wanted to invade the Soviets in the first place, other than Hitler being a land grabby bastard, Germany didn't have very many resources and it had obviously no connection to any of the big seas. So there was no way of getting any of the resources, so they went looking for it in different countries. And that's probably why they targeted the oil fields to supply their own war. So Hitler needed those to even continue the war, which is also ultimately part of why he failed, is not being able
Yeah.
to get resources.
Well, I mean, we touched on this in a previous episode, but right at the end of the war, the Germans' trucks were being pulled by horses. Like they were completely depleted of oil. They had to eventually invent a synthetic oil in order to be able to continue flying planes and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that was in our X Company episodes.
Yeah.
Go listen to those too.
Yeah, and the other thing that we've discussed on podcasts before too is this idea of Lebensraum, where the Germans wanted more quote unquote living space, and they figured that if they advanced into Russia, they could get that. And they also had this sense that Slavic people were subhuman, and the German propaganda mill was quite good at putting out this message. And so the Germans were just convinced that they could take over this land and it wasn't really going to hurt anybody.
So wild to me how that happens. But then it shouldn't be that wild because it's still happening today to other peoples. But it just never changes. It just makes me sad. Anyway, I'll go back to the movie now. Alyosha, after having escaped his tank pursuers, reports to the general, played by Nikolai Kryuchkov, who applauds him for his bravery. At first, you think he's going to kind of reprimand him for retreating, but then he's like, oh, you're actually kind of brave. So he says that he's going to give Alyosha a citation, but instead, Alyosha asks for permission to go home and visit his mother because he wants to see her and also he wants to fix her roof. So he gets 6 days leave, 2 for travel to his mother, 2 to fix the roof, and 2 to come back to the front.
Yeah, there's a super cute little moment in this where Alyosha bonks his head on the door when he's going out. This movie is full of little moments like that, and I really liked it. It was so charming.
I bet it's just an accident and I just kept it in there. It looked super real to me. Can we also briefly just mention how young this guy looks? I feel like this was an actual young guy.
He was 19.
Yeah, right. And he's adorable. He's so pretty. All of them are so pretty, but this guy's got cheekbones for days.
Yeah, him and the female lead who we'll meet in a bit were both virtual unknowns when they were cast, and that was a conscious choice. They wanted people who were inexperienced in the industry that people hadn't really seen before, some kind of fresh faces, and they were both really young. I think maybe they were both 19, and they both went on to have long careers in Soviet cinema, I gather.
It feels very natural. It's tricky for me a little bit to judge whether the acting is good because it's in a language I don't understand, and it always makes it harder to judge, but it doesn't feel forced or anything.
Yeah. Private Seryosha Pavlov, played by Gennady Yuktin, asked Alyosha to take word and some soap because soap's a big ticket item. They don't have much of it, and so this will be a real treat. So he asked Alyosha to take some soap home to his wife, whose town he'll be passing through on his way home. And they're trying to bully this sergeant into giving over these big hunks of soap that Alyosha can take. It's really cute. They're bullying him into giving up first one chunk of soap and then the second chunk of soap.
And that's all the stuff they have too. It's so funny. It's like, I only have two. They're like, well, you can just give him the second one too, then. It doesn't really matter. There's not enough anyway.
Yeah.
So you'll see throughout this movie that Alyosha kind of bumps into all these different, really colorful characters on the way. And one of them is someone he meets next at the train station. He helps a wounded soldier called Vasha, played by Yevgeny Urbansky. And Vasha is working on, what are they called in English? Crutches. And Vasha is worried about going home to his wife. He's married, but he isn't the same man as when he left because now he's wounded and he's disabled. And he's like, I can't go home. And then he goes in to write a telegram home and then doesn't show up for the train. So Alyosha goes over to him and finds him soaking. And a woman at the station blatantly tells him to stop being a dumbass. And he's like, okay, I'll stop being a dumbass now. And this man is very good looking. I have some feelings about this man.
He's good looking, but I don't think he's good looking in a way that would turn your head if you saw him on the street. Like he's got sort of an interesting face for sure, and it's like very expressive, but I wouldn't say he's a classical handsome dude.
No, he's got very outspoken features and stuff, but I feel like it's also a little bit just this movie that makes him interesting looking.
Yeah.
But who knows?
I actually looked him up because I was curious to see sometimes, as we've seen in these movies before, I think it was The Best Years of Our Lives where they had cast an actual like war veteran who's disabled. So I was just curious to see if they had done the same here. And instead I found out that he actually died performing a stunt in a later film, aged just 33.
No, that's so sad. Why?
I mean, I can't speak for the Soviet film industry, but I do wonder if maybe there wasn't a lot of health and safety precautions.
Maybe. I also wonder if it's a respected job to be an actor in Russia. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but yeah, RIP this guy. So Alyosha's on the train and he's with a bunch of soldiers and they're talking and joking and having a good time. They're initially skeptical of Alyosha's accomplishments. He tells them that he took out a couple of tanks and they're like, "Oh, sure, you took out some tanks, did you? What did you take them out with?" You know, they're kind of razzing him. And when Alyosha changes trains, he sees Vasya meet his wife, played by Elsa Leshte, and she's a factory worker and she welcomes him home with open arms. And it's actually a really sweet reunion scene. I really thought it was cute.
I also thought it was cute. And also, I expected some face sucking, like old Hollywood style, but they do something different in Russia, apparently. They just smush faces. But it was very sweet.
Yeah, sometimes in movies you can see like actors kissing or embracing like they know the camera is on them and it's meant to look good. And this was just two people who had been apart for a long time and were just like very emotionally greeting each other. She's like kissing his face. It's like it's not meant to look pretty because great displays of human emotion don't have to.
No, I did kind of love it. And they walk off together. And you see, and I'd seen it before, but I think you only noticed at this specific scene that Russia only has one leg.
I don't know if it's that I didn't notice, but I think that that's the moment where it really hits home how wounded he is.
It does, because he's wearing this trench coat. You see him sometimes full body, but most of it's just his face and his torso. And then he walks away with her, and it's like this really outspoken silhouette of him in his trench coat and this one leg and his crutches. I did notice, I don't know if you saw it, but she tries to kind of hold on to him, to be affectionate with him, but he then pushes her away, so there is that little bit of distance as they walk away, and I thought that was really telling.
I also thought it was interesting how they went out of their way to mention that she was a factory worker. In some of the reviews I saw from this movie, they were like, oh, there's no Soviet propaganda. And I'm like, well, I don't know that I would say there's no Soviet propaganda. They really go out of their way to be like, yeah, like she mentions it out of the blue for kind of no reason.
I also feel like any of the news reports that we get are meant to be propaganda-y. So I don't think they're actual real news reports, but still, they're still like talk of the war and the Russian forces as the Soviet forces. I keep saying Russian, that's wrong, right? The Soviet forces as they advance.
Do you mean like propaganda? Do you think that was the express point, like purpose by the filmmaker of including those things?
I think
Do you think the
so.
propaganda, do you think the filmmaker is trying to make propaganda or the original clips are propaganda?
No, the filmmaker, I think, is it's let's say it's not anti-war, is what I'm trying to say. They do include things that don't really give you any storyline progression, but are the backdrop of the war. I don't know if I'm making my point correctly though. So maybe.
Yeah, because I didn't get the sense like that didn't feel propaganda-y to me. Like to me, what it felt like was that every time Alyosha was hearing more news from the front, it was like, oh, the troops have moved on and more time has passed, and we're supposed to get the sense that like he's running out of time. Like that's what it felt like to me.
That's a good point, actually. That might be a bit more true than what I just said. I think I maybe actually agree with that. So, Alyosha's trying to get onto his next train, and to do so, he has to bribe a sentry called, I don't know how to pronounce his name, I've been trying to do it all day. Gavrilskin, played by Alexander Kuznetsov. This guy is really kind of sneaky and he's like, you cannot go onto my train and I have to guard this train because otherwise the lieutenant, who's a monster, will get mad at us both and we'll be in so much trouble. And Alyosha then manages to persuade him to let him go on a train with a can of meat that says luncheon canned meat, and I immediately noticed that this was not Russian. So Sam actually already knew what this was. It is very likely that Alyosha has acquired it through the Land-Lease Act, which was a policy under which the United States supplied Allied nations with stuff like food, oil, and materials between 1941 and 1945. And this was signed into law on March 11, 1941, so that would have been before the US officially entered the war. So they were helping the war effort, but were not directly involved yet.
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about this when we talked about Dieppe. The Allies were trying to run resupply convoys up past Norway to get stuff to the Russians, and they were having a bit of a tough time because the Germans kept intercepting them.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting because I looked up some of these canned meat things on the internet, and they would have been in Russian, but for this movie, they made them in English.
So Alyosha encounters another stowaway named Shura. This is our female lead, played by Shanna Prokorenko, whom he must prevent from jumping from the train when she spots him. So she immediately panics and is like, oh my God, there's a man on here. And you can tell she's a bit naive and sheltered and maybe hasn't been alone with a man before. And it's this whole thing where she's like, no, stay away from me. And he's like, I'll do whatever you want, but like maybe don't jump off the train.
She throws out her like all her belongings too. They end up in like river somewhere. It's like, oh no, no, I've dropped all my belongings. I want to get off the train and get them later. And it's funny to me because she tries to jump 3 or 4 times and he has to actually physically stop her from jumping off the train. It's a long scene. But it's kind of cute. He's like, I'm not gonna do anything, and she just doesn't believe him.
That feel when you meet a boy on the hay train and he has to stop you from jumping out of the hay train 3 or 4 times. You know, that feel.
That one specific feel, yes. once Shura kind of gets over being afraid of him, she and Alyosha make friends and get a little flirty, but then she says, "Oh no, I'm trying to visit my pilot fiance and he's in hospital." But then our friend, the guy Alyosha just bribed, Gavrilkin, sees Shura, so he has to bribe him again with more meat.
Yes, Gavrilkin spots his opportunity because he's like, when they heard him coming, they jumped into the hay together, and he's like, "Well, I saw your boots together. I know you guys were laying in the hay. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So you better give me some more canned beef, or I'll tell everyone."
They share a bacon sandwich, and her face when she eats the sandwich is like, she's probably never had a bacon sandwich before.
She is loving that bacon sandwich, and I was like, "Girl, I don't blame you. I probably also look like that when I'm eating a bacon sandwich." The lieutenant, who is Gavrilkin's boss, so this whole time Gavrilkin's been like, "You better bribe me because my lieutenant's an asshole, and he'll make a whole thing of it if he catches you on this train." So when we actually meet the lieutenant, played by Evgeny Tatarin, he's fine with them being on the train, and he actually makes Gavrilkin give the bribes back.
Gavrilkin called him the beast or something, like he's some really just mean, tough guy, and he's quite sweet.
Yeah.
So you can tell Gavrilkin is just kind of full of shit.
Yeah. And then Shura and Alyosha talk friendship terms. She's like, "Do you think that women and men can just be friends?" And he's like, "Of course I think that."
Alyosha gets off the train to get some water. This is a running theme in this movie. But he ends up being left behind because he gets back to the train too late. Because he's listening to news of the front, as we talked about before. And he goes to try and catch up to the train and asks a truck driver. It's a lady and she's played by Valentina Telegina. And she gives him a very damp and also very sleepy ride to the next station. I was like, geez, are they going to crash this van? But he again misses the train when he gets there because they just took too long.
Yeah. The truck driver was another character that I really enjoyed. They're just like fun little moments that crop up in this movie where you're like, what a fun, juicy little character. I liked it.
Yeah, it just made me laugh that she was just falling asleep. I say it makes me laugh, but she said something about being awake for 48 hours for whatever reason. I was like, what's going on over there? Why are you awake for 48 hours? But that's one of those, I think, one of those backdrops of the war that's kind of seeping into the civilian life that we get a little hint of. It's very subtle. It's not in your face, but it's there.
And her son is at the front as well.
Oh, right, she tells him, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But so Alyosha's missed his train, but all is not lost because Shura has disembarked from the train and she's waiting for him. So they reunite and they go looking for some water, and they finally get some water, and then Shura finds these big hunks of soap that were a gift for Pavlov's wife, Liza. And they realize that they just happen to be in her town. So they go to see her to give her this soap.
How lucky that they are in the exact town that they need to be in. Sure, I also kind of suspect that Alyosha has a girlfriend at this point because she also found he's gotten a scarf for his mother to take home as a present, and she finds it and she's like, who's this for? But she still goes with him because they have to go and find Pavlov's wife, who's called Liza. She's played by Valentina Markova, and she's living with another man. We don't see him, but we hear him, and we see proof that there's been another man in the house. So Alyosha's not having this. So he's like, I'm gonna take my soap back right now, and I'm gonna give it to Pavlov's father instead, who's played by Vladimir Pokrovsky, and his father is injured, and he makes Alyosha stay with him for a while and talk about his son at the front, even though he doesn't really know him. He just pretends that he does, and he's like, your son is a good man, and he's doing so great at the front. It's quite sweet.
Yeah, this is a running theme for Alyosha, right? Like he's running behind. He barely has time to visit his mother, but he's like, "Sure, I'll bring soap to this guy's wife." And then he gets there, and to him, it just feels so morally terrible that this woman has taken up with another man while her husband's at the front. So he leaves the soap with her initially, but then he feels too badly about it, so he has to go back and get it. And all of this is costing him time on his journey home. And then he goes to see this old man and give him the soap. And then he barely knows the old man's son, but he's still trying to tell him all these nice things about him. If Alyosha had been a little more of an asshole, he probably would have gotten home on time.
Yeah, I also just realized I'd already kind of forgotten, but when they get to where their home used to be, Liza's home, there used to be a house, but it's been bombed. So she's staying at another place. So that's another one of those. The war is definitely going on.
Yeah. Alyosha sneaks Shura onto a military train. She's not allowed, but he puts his coat and his hat on her and she manages to get on.
So sweet!
Yeah, it's cute. And when they have to leave one another at Shura's stop, she admits that there is no fiance. She lied about having a pilot fiance in the hospital, and she's actually on her way to visit her aunt. And Alyosha doesn't realize until after they've separated that she was trying to tell him that she loves him, and that's why she spilled the beans.
He's such a boy. Like, come on, dude, it's so obvious. But the scene on the train where they're standing in between train carts or train wagons, I don't know what you would call them in English. It's so sweet. It's lit all beautifully, and it's probably the most romantic looking scene from the entire movie. They've made it really pretty and all shiny and glimmery and pretty, and I love it. But as Alyosha begins to feel really sad because he's left Shura behind. His train that he's on with Ukrainians, I believe he's sharing a cabin with some Ukrainians, is set ablaze by German bombers, so he's once again delayed. And he must help rescue his fellow passengers, so he's really running out of time. And in the morning, the train that comes to collect them can only take the wounded and the women and children, so he's not really having a very good journey. He's just delayed and delayed some more.
Yeah, once again, nice guy Alyosha delayed because he decided he was going to help all these people.
This scene kind of made me laugh a little because there's just an overlay of fire. Some stuff is on fire, but then across the whole thing is this transparent bit of fire the entire time, and it just made me laugh. You can tell that it's not a high budget movie. It's very pretty, but it didn't have any special effects budget or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, so Alyosha, listen, it's like the morning of the day that he's supposed to go home. So he really doesn't have a lot of time, but he rafts across the river. And when he gets across the river, he has to convince another truck driver, played by Yev Stigneyev, to take him the last stretch home to his village. And the truck driver is like, but then he kind of turns around and ends up coming to get him after all.
He's also like, I could get arrested for taking you. And I was like, why? Why can he get arrested?
Well, I think it's because so few soldiers got to go on furlough that he probably just didn't believe that he was actually on furlough. He probably thought he was AWOL.
Oh, right, that does make sense. It's so funny to me that there just happens to be a raft just on the river waiting for him.
Where there's a will, there's a way. You know, sometimes you manifest a whole ass raft.
By being so nice to everybody else.
Literally, exactly.
It's good karma, is what it is.
Yeah.
Alyosha gets home in the nick of time, but only finds his childhood friend Zoya, played by Marina Kramnova. And he's got 5 minutes to stay home. He can't fix his mother's roof. He gets to reunite with his mother very briefly as she is running through the fields to meet him after she's been told he's home. And then he has to return to the front. And he does give her her little kerchief or scarf or whatever it is, the beautiful thing. And she promises to wait for him. And it's so sweet, but it's like 5 minutes. I'm like, really? Does he really only have 5 minutes to stay with her? It's so short. And he's like, very optimistically, I'll be back, mother. And you're like, no, you won't be, because we know that he dies. This is the moment you remember that he's dead.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought was really effective was the way when him and his mother are embracing, there's no music. It's just quiet. And I found that was so impactful because everything was leading up to this, you know, even the little funny moments, the sweet moments, the cute moments, like ultimately the story was about them reuniting but knowing that it couldn't last kind of thing.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder how many mothers in this war will have been waiting for their sons to return to him and how many of them didn't. As you said in the beginning, so many people died in this fight, so it's sad. But also, it almost doesn't feel sad in this scene. It feels very hopeful because he's so optimistic. And he's jumping back onto the truck driver's truck that'll take him back to the front. I wonder if he even made it back because he's been so unlucky on the way here, so who knows?
Yeah. The voiceover from the beginning comes back to tell us he, referring to Alyosha, could have become a remarkable man. He could have become a builder or beautified the land with gardens. But he was, and in our memory will forever remain, a soldier, a Russian soldier.
That's the only moment where I felt some kind of Russian pride. It felt very like the very last line, the repeating of a Russian soldier felt very patriotic to me. The rest of the movie really didn't.
Well, I also think it's crucial that they didn't say a Soviet soldier.
It's
Like they
true.
very specifically mentioned Russia as a country.
It's singular, yeah. And that's the end of the movie. I think it's a perfectly paced movie, too. Nothing drags or takes too long, nothing gets skimmed over, none of the side characters are only there for 1 second. It's just perfect in that way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought it was great. And I just liked how, even though we are basically seeing this whole story happen to this character after he's died, we already know that his death is pre-written and there's nothing that's going to undo it. You still have this sense of hopefulness, like you were saying. The inevitability doesn't really sink in because the characters feel so vital and alive.
Yeah, and you still get to kind of wonder, does he go back to Shura? Does he go and find her? And we don't know, we'll never know. It feels hopeful in that way, that he'll go back to the village where he left her and look for her. On the 2 seconds he has left of his furlough.
Right, that's the thing. When they're leaving each other, he's trying to yell at her where she can write to him and she can't hear him. And I'm like, wow, y'all hung out for like 36 hours and not once were you like, this is the village that I'm from.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. It's definitely made me want to look into the Eastern Front more. Like all of these movies do as we watch them. It's so good. It's such a nice, gentle way of going into that conflict because it's so big. So much stuff happened. But it also makes me want to see other Soviet productions, if there are any good ones that we can understand and find and have good subtitles for.
Yeah, for sure. This one was released in the United States in 1960 as part of a Soviet American film exchange during a thaw in the Cold War. And so this was a movie that wasn't necessarily just made for Soviet audiences or just appreciated by Soviet audiences. It did get wider release and it actually received quite a lot of praise from American viewers and critics. It was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. I just find it so interesting the period of time in which movies were made so often just really informs them. Like, I just think that's so interesting.
Yeah, it almost makes me wish I had studied movie making a little bit more in university. Before we were doing this podcast, I never thought of movies as anything other than entertainment. But they're also just such a product of the time and they're so informative of the time that it's so interesting to think about them in that way.
Yeah. And this one, a lot of the movies that were made in sort of the earlier Soviet era did tend to be a lot more nationalistic and quite more obviously packed to the gills with propaganda. But this movie was made during what they call the Khrushchev thaw, which Stalin died in 1953. This movie was made in 1959. And during this period, there was this kind of like liberalization. And so it's much less propaganda heavy. It's much more acceptable to reference the human tragedy of war and to actually depict things that aren't necessarily 100% flattering to Stalin and his policies. And this period didn't last. It ended when Khrushchev was ousted as Soviet leader in 1964. So this is a really kind of interesting window of time from which to watch Soviet movies.
Yes. I wish I could tell any of you which other movies to watch, but we've only just watched this one. So I'm sure we'll try and find some more in the future. Definitely do look this one up on YouTube. So we've still got to rate this movie. We're rating this movie appropriately. We're rating it tins of canned meat out of 10. Why do we always pick these tongue twisters? It's like done on purpose to spite me.
We could have picked something else. I didn't realize it would be a tongue twister.
Everything is a tongue twister for me, so maybe I shouldn't be on your case about this.
Right, I'm being unfairly maligned. I will rate this movie 8 tins of canned meat out of 10. I thought that the pacing was good, as you said. I thought the acting was good. It felt really authentic to me. And I would say that's true for pretty much all the supporting cast as well. I thought all of these people were really well chosen. They fit into the movie super well. Just a really simple story, but also a really powerful one. It was a fun window into the civilian experience during the war for the Russian people, and it gave me an opportunity to do a bit of homework on something I didn't necessarily know very much about, and I'll probably try and pick up some books so I can learn a little bit more. But yeah, it's a charming little movie. I honestly think that people should check it out. Like, go on YouTube, throw on this movie. It's only 90 minutes. Like, I don't think you'll regret it.
I agree. I'm gonna rate it also 8 tins of canned beef out of 10. I also just really enjoyed it. For all the reasons you've already mentioned, I also thought the music was quite fun, very old-timey obviously, but still fun. And the acting was unforced, I want to say, and maybe that's because there were such newcomers to acting and just felt like they were people having a regular conversation where there just happened to be a camera on them. And yeah, I think the biggest thing for me compared to other old-timey movies is the pacing and the length of the movie is just perfect. I would like the others to be a little bit more like this. But yeah, definitely go watch it. I definitely recommend.
Are you reading anything?
I am reading something. I am reading a memoir by Martha Gellhorn, who was a wartime correspondent. But her memoir is called Travels with Myself and Another. And it's not really a war memoir so much as it is. She was also a travel writer, so she just writes her memoir based on travels that she's taken, and they're all what she calls horror travels, so they're all just terribly. She just has terrible misfortune. She also likes Ernest Hemingway, but she never calls him Ernest Hemingway in the book. She only calls him UC, which stands for Unwilling Companion. So it should give you an idea of their relationship as well. It didn't last very long. They got kind of sick of each other after World War II and they broke off their marriage. It's a really funny memoir. She writes in a really funny way. So I'm looking forward to finishing that. And I did recently buy 7 books, so I have quite a couple more to read. How about you?
Well, in the time it takes you to read those 7 books, I will be reading Alan Turing, The Enigma by Andrew Hodges, all 660 pages of it.
Well, I'm guessing you'll be finished with that book, and then I'll have finished one of my 7 much smaller books. Anyway, those 2 things should give you another hint into what we'll be discussing very soon on the podcast, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, me too. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can rate us 5 stars. You can definitely send this episode to a friend. You can visit our website, rosieTheReviewer.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer Podcast.
Thank you for listening and see you next week.
Bye.